Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling something you might not expect, the downsides of positive thinking.
Yeah, it seems like everywhere you turn these days, it's all about the power of positive thinking.
Right, like those bestsellers, The Secret and The Power of Positive Thinking, they've sold millions of copies.
And they basically promise that if you just think the right thoughts, you can achieve anything.
Manifest your dreams and all that. It's a really appealing idea, for sure.
And to be fair, there's definitely some science behind it. Positive thinking does have proven benefits.
Like what kind of benefits?
Well, studies have shown that it can help reduce stress, boost your immune system, even improve your cardiovascular health.
So it sounds like there are some real upsides. So why are we even talking about the downsides?
Well, it turns out there's a fine line between healthy optimism and what some call toxic positivity. When we cross that line, positive thinking can actually backfire and sabotage our efforts.
Okay, so it's not that positive thinking itself is bad. It's more about how we use it.
Exactly, and there are some potential pitfalls we need to be aware of.
Like what? What are some of these hidden dangers?
Well, one of the most surprising ones is complacency. It might sound strange, but just fantasizing about success can actually trick our brains into feeling like we've already achieved our goals.
Wait, really? You're saying that just daydreaming about that promotion or finishing that marathon can make us less likely to take action?
It sounds counterintuitive, but that's exactly what the research shows. There's this concept called mental relaxation, where our brains essentially get a premature reward from just imagining the desired outcome. And that can lead to a decrease in motivation and effort.
Because our brains think, hey, we already felt good about achieving that goal in our imagination, so why bother putting in the actual work?
Yeah, it's like our brains are giving us a participation trophy before we've even started the race.
So what does this look like in real life?
Imagine someone who dreams of being a successful entrepreneur. They spend hours scrolling through social media, seeing all these amazing entrepreneurs, and they picture themselves giving TED Talks and making billions.
Okay, I think we all know someone like that.
But here's the thing. They never actually take any steps to start a business. They're so caught up in the fantasy of success that they never do the actual work.
Wow, that's such a good point. It's like we can get addicted to the potential without ever actually doing anything.
Exactly. And that's one of the big dangers of excessive positive thinking.
So complacency is one downside. What else do we need to be careful of?
Another danger is that too much positive thinking can make us ignore real problems. This is where that idea of toxic positivity really comes into play. It's like we get so focused on staying positive that we end up denying or suppressing any negative emotions.
So it's like sweeping problems under the rug instead of actually dealing with them.
Precisely. And while a positive attitude can be helpful in many situations, it's also crucial to acknowledge problems if we want to solve them.
So how can ignoring problems backfire? Can you give us an example?
Sure, let's say a couple is having some serious issues in their relationship. Instead of having honest conversations about their problems, they just keep telling each other, everything is perfect and we're meant to be.
Oh, I've definitely seen that happen.
They might even try to present this happy facade to the outside world, but the underlying issues are still there and they're not being addressed.
Yeah, it's like putting a Band-Aid on a broken bone. It might look okay on the surface, but it's not actually fixing anything.
And in the long run, that approach can lead to resentment, frustration, and even a complete breakdown of communication.
So how can we tell the difference between healthy optimism and this toxic positivity? It seems like there's a fine line there.
It is a fine line, and we'll be exploring that more as we go deeper into this, but for now, it's important to remember that true optimism isn't about denying the existence of challenges. It's about acknowledging them while still believing in our ability to overcome them.
So it's about finding that balance between hope and action. We can't just wish our problems away. We have to be willing to face them head on while still maintaining a positive outlook.
Exactly. And that actually brings us to another potential pitfall of excessive positive thinking: self-blame.
Self-blame, how does that fit in?
Well, when we buy into this idea that our thoughts can control everything in our lives, it sets us up for a lot of disappointment.
Because if we believe we can just manifest our dreams by thinking positive thoughts and then things don't go our way, it's easy to blame ourselves.
Right? We might start thinking things like, maybe I didn't visualize hard enough, or maybe I just wasn't positive enough.
And that can lead to a spiral of self-doubt and even shame.
It's like we're holding ourselves responsible for things that are completely outside of our control.
It's so important to remember that life is complex and there are so many factors that contribute to our successes and failures.
Absolutely. Sometimes things just don't work out the way we hoped, and it doesn't mean we're not worthy or that we didn't try hard enough.
I think that's such a crucial point, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages about positive thinking and manifestation. It's easy to start blaming ourselves when things don't go according to plan.
It is, and it's important to cultivate self-compassion and recognize that we're all human. We're going to make mistakes and face setbacks. That's just part of life.
So, if too much positive thinking can lead to all these problems, complacency, ignoring problems, even self blame, what's the alternative? Is there a way to harness the power of positive thinking without falling into these traps?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what we'll be exploring in the next part of this deep dive. We'll be talking about something called realistic optimism, which offers a more balanced and effective approach to navigating the ups and downs of life.
I'm really interested to hear more about that. So far, we've definitely uncovered some surprising downsides to something that's often presented as this perfect solution.
It definitely seems like there's a lot more to positive thinking than meets the eye.
I'm ready to dive deeper into this concept of realistic optimism. It sounds like it might just be the key to a more balanced and fulfilling life. So stay tuned for part two.
Okay, so we've seen how too much positive thinking can backfire and actually hold us back. So where do we go from here? What's the alternative? Well, that's where this idea of realistic optimism comes in. It's not about denying the challenges we face, but it's about approaching them with a more balanced perspective.
Okay, I like the sound of that. But how do we actually put that into practice? How do we shift from that blind optimism to this more realistic approach?
One really powerful technique is something called mental contrasting.
Mental contrasting. What's that?
It involves visualizing both your desired outcome and the obstacles that might get in your way.
So instead of just picturing yourself crossing the finish line, you also think about the hurdles along the way.
Exactly. And research has shown that this can actually be incredibly effective. It can boost your motivation and increase the likelihood of actually achieving your goals.
Because you're mentally preparing yourself for those challenges, so you're less likely to give up when they inevitably pop up.
Right. It's like you're packing a first aid kit for your journey. You don't expect to get injured, but you're prepared just in case.
I love that analogy. It makes so much sense. So mental contrasting is one tool. What are some other ways we can cultivate this realistic optimism?
Another important strategy is to shift our focus from outcome-based goals to process-based goals.
Okay, I'm not sure I follow. What do you mean by that?
Instead of fixating on a specific outcome, which is often influenced by things outside of our control, we focus on the actions we can take each day to move towards our objectives.
Ah, I see. So instead of saying, I will get that promotion, which might depend on a lot of factors outside of my control, I would say I will dedicate an hour each day to improving my skills.
Exactly. It's about finding empowerment in the process, not just the end result.
That makes a lot of sense. It feels so much more grounded and actionable than just hoping for the best. Okay, so mental contrasting and focusing on the process. What else can we do to embrace this realistic optimism?
This one might sound a bit counterintuitive, but learning to embrace constructive negativity can actually be incredibly valuable.
Wait, negativity? I thought we were trying to be more optimistic.
Haha, I know it sounds strange, but it's not about dwelling on the negative or becoming a pessimist. It's about reframing those negative experiences as valuable sources of information.
Okay, so how can negativity be constructive?
Let's say you receive some critical feedback on a project. Instead of getting defensive or just brushing it off, you can choose to view it as an opportunity for growth.
So you're asking, what can I learn from this, and how can I use this feedback to improve?
Exactly. You're turning that potentially negative experience into a stepping stone for progress.
I like that a lot. It's like those setbacks are actually signposts guiding us towards something better.
And it reminds us that realistic optimism is a journey, not a destination.
It's a good point. It's not about reaching some perfect state of optimism. It's about constantly learning and growing from our experiences. Okay, so we've got mental contrasting, focusing on the process, and embracing constructive negativity. Any other tips for developing this realistic optimism?
Well, one thing that can make a huge difference is having a supportive network of people around you, people who offer both encouragement and accountability.
Yeah, I think that's so important. We all need people who believe in us, but also people who can help us stay grounded.
It's about finding that balance between support and constructive criticism. Seek out people who will celebrate your wins, but also offer honest feedback when you need it.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've covered a lot of ground, but are there any specific exercises or techniques that we can use to really put these concepts into practice?
There are tons of great tools and strategies out there. We've already talked about mental contrasting, but something else that can be really powerful is practicing gratitude.
Gratitude. Yeah, I've heard that's important, but how does that fit into this whole realistic optimism thing?
Even when things are tough, there are always things to be grateful for. Taking a few minutes each day to think about those things can really shift your perspective.
It's like you're actively choosing to focus on the good even when there are challenges present.
And the more we do that, the more our brains start to naturally notice and appreciate those positive things. It creates a positive feedback loop.
Okay, I like that. So, gratitude, mental contrasting, focusing on the process, embracing constructive negativity, and building a supportive network. That's a lot of great tools to work with.
It is. And remember, developing realistic optimism is an ongoing journey. It's not a one-time fix.
Right. It's about constantly striving to find that balance between hope and action.
Exactly. And it's okay to stumble along the way. The key is to learn from those experiences and keep moving forward.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this whole realistic optimism thing.
We've definitely covered a lot, but there's still so much more to explore.
I'm excited to keep digging into this and learn more about how we can apply these principles in our everyday lives. So stick with us as we continue this deep dive into realistic optimism. We'll be right back.
All right, so we've been talking about this idea of realistic optimism and how it's different from just being positive all the time.
And we've explored some pretty useful tools for actually cultivating this more balanced approach to, well, to life, really. But I'm wondering, how do we deal with those moments when doubt creeps in? We've all been there, right? Even with the best mindset, those times when you start questioning everything.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a really great question because it highlights something really important about realistic optimism. It's not about eliminating negative feelings altogether.
Right, so we're not talking about putting on a happy face and pretending that everything is perfect all the time.
Exactly. Realistic optimism isn't about ignoring those feelings. It's more about acknowledging them and learning to navigate them in a healthy way.
So what can we do when we're feeling those doubts and negative thoughts, instead of trying to force ourselves to be positive when we're genuinely feeling down?
One thing that can be really helpful is to try to reframe those thoughts. Instead of getting swept away by them, pause for a second and ask yourself, what can I learn from this? What's the message here?
So it's about using those negative feelings as a starting point for self-reflection.
Exactly. You're turning those negative feelings into fuel for self-improvement rather than letting them derail you completely.
It's like those doubts are actually little signposts pointing us towards growth.
I love that. And even with the best intentions, we're all going to make mistakes. We're going to face setbacks and experience self-doubt. It's all part of being human.
Right, but instead of getting stuck in those negative spirals, we can choose to view them as opportunities to learn and become better.
Absolutely. It's a constant journey, this realistic optimism thing.
So reframing is one strategy. What else can we do when those doubts start creeping in?
Well, something we touched on earlier, but it's worth mentioning again, is the power of gratitude.
Oh, yeah. Gratitude. Even when things feel tough, there are always things to be thankful for.
Exactly. And, taking a few minutes each day to really reflect on the things you're grateful for can really shift your perspective and make a difference in how you feel.
It's like we're actively choosing to focus on the good, even when there are challenges present.
And the more we practice gratitude, the more our brains start to naturally notice and appreciate those good things.
It's like building a positive feedback loop where gratitude leads to more positivity, which leads to even more gratitude.
Exactly. And that upward spiral can make a huge difference in how we navigate the ups and downs of life.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a much better understanding of this realistic optimism thing and how it's different from that think positive no matter what approach.
And the best part is it doesn't require us to deny our emotions. It's about embracing the whole spectrum of human experience while focusing on what we can control and what we can learn from.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I had one final question. If realistic optimism is this powerful tool, are there any pitfalls we should watch out for as we start to apply it in our lives?
That's a great question. And one potential pitfall is mistaking realistic optimism for pessimism.
Oh, interesting. So how do we tell the difference?
Well, pessimism is about expecting the worst to happen all the time, while realistic optimism is about acknowledging that challenges might arise, but still believing that things can work out.
So it's about being prepared, but not letting that preparation turn into fear or negativity.
Exactly. It's about finding that sweet spot between being aware and being hopeful.
Well, this has been such a fascinating conversation. We've explored the downsides of too much positive thinking and unpacked this idea of realistic optimism.
And hopefully you've gained some valuable insights and tools that you can start using right away.
It's been a really insightful deep dive into a topic that I think we all need to be thinking about more. And remember, cultivating realistic optimism is an ongoing process.
Be kind to yourself, celebrate your wins, learn from your setbacks, and keep moving forward. Thanks for joining us.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.